Our guest heretic Josh Gitalis is here today to tell us why fat, calories, and exercise are only part of the weight loss equation. Today, we'll be talking about how the endocrine system, and more precisely our toxic load from everything from your pajamas to pesticides, are a major cause of excess fat storage. Plus, we'll talk about his clinical nutrition program to help practitioners hone their skills in helping clients with a wide range of conditions. We're getting the let out today on the Nutrition Heretic podcast.
Meet Gina. Gina wanted to lose weight, so she spent 2 years fasting, detoxing, and dabbling with vegan diets while practicing a shit ton of yoga to lose 25 pounds. But it took so long that nobody noticed. Then, Gina started Frenching her food by eating fatty cheeses, butter, sausages, and red meat, and lost 15 more pounds in only 2 months. Everybody noticed this time. Frenching your food unlocks the riddle of weight loss that skinny French chicks use to slim down, look young, and live longer despite doing everything wrong. Be like Gina. Start Frenching your food today by visiting nutritionheretic.com/Frenching.
Fat is bad for you.
I just pop a pill and I'm fine.
Meat is murder. It's time for bad food punishment. It's time for real nourishment. It's time for the Nutrition Heretic.
The following program is provided as information only and may not be construed as medical or health advice. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. No action or inaction should be taken solely on the basis of the information provided here. Please consult with a licensed healthcare professional or doctor on any matter relating to your health and well-being. Aloha and welcome to the Nutrition Heretic podcast. This is Adrienne Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. Today, I wanted to remind you about my pet peeve on calories and fat grams and weight loss, how that pertains to weight loss. As you know, that's kind of been one of the messages that I try to inform people about, because when we talk about obesity, the first thing most people go for is what gluttons those people are. Why can't they just get up and exercise? And from my experience, particularly my background as a dancer, I know many dancers who are struggling with their weight, and they all have something in common, and it's not too much fat, too much calories. And the way I look at it, most overweight people who are trying desperately to lose weight, and they've been doing at this for 5, 10, 20 years, they are more knowledgeable about the tricks of weight loss, and they've tried everything from vegan to paleo and everything in between, and they can't figure it out. But unless they're lucky, they are not going to find information about what we're going to talk about today. And what I have done is I've invited, I want to call him doctor all the time, but he's not. He's a clinical nutritionist. His name is Josh Gitalis, and he is in Toronto, Canada. Welcome to the show.
Oh, it's great to be here.
So talk to me. Am I totally off base here when I say that fat people are not gluttons, and that there could be other reasons why people gain and store excess weight?
You are bang on. Yeah. So there are lots of other reasons, right? And not all of them are so obvious. So, I know we discussed that we wanted to talk about this particular topic, but there's a group of chemicals called obesogens. Mm-hmm. And just by the name, I think most people could get an understanding of what they might do. The term was coined in 2006 by Bruce Blumberg, and basically it means a chemical that inappropriately stimulates adipogenesis and fat storage. And adipogenesis is just a fancy word for making more fat. Adipo, fat, and genesis, create. So there's chemicals in our environment that actually give a message to the body, hey, hang on to more fat for whatever reason, right?
Right.
And there's many of them. There's over 20 that have definitely been identified as
Yikes.
obesogens, and they're probably, if people who are listening right now look around the room, there are probably a number of them just around them.
Right.
So I can give you a few examples.
Yes, yeah, and I'm
Um,
particularly interested in the really surprising ones. The one because I think people know certain things, and you could talk about all of them, but there might be some that are really just like, whoa, I didn't think that was my mattress could cause this, or what have you.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely. And I'll discuss one in particular that's quite hidden. Most people don't even know they're exposed to it, and it's everywhere. And these are flame retardants. These are polybrominated diphenyl ethers. And there's an interesting story behind these. It kind of goes way back to the days where everyone was fighting the big smoking companies, the big smoke companies, big tobacco. And there was a big problem with fires, right? People lighting cigarettes, not smoking the whole thing, or falling asleep with a cigarette in their hand, or, not putting it out properly, or, a young person gets a hold of one and, throws it somewhere. And fire starts, right? So the smoking, big tobacco was mandated to create cigarettes that self-extinguish. So if you stop smoking them for a period of time, they would kind of go out.
Right.
But they weren't so happy with that. So, obviously they had, millions of dollars behind them, and they kind of turned it back around and said, well, that's actually not the problem with these fires. The problem is that things catch on fire too easily. So I know.
They do what they naturally do. That's a problem.
Right. It sounds ridiculous, right? So they said, you guys need to put something in your products that don't go up in flames so quick. And that's when we started to saturate all of our products, like upholstery, clothes, cars, lots of other things too, with flame retardants, these chemicals that are quite harmful to the body. They have this obesogenic effect, as I spoke about. They inhibit thyroid activity, and they're in your environment. They get right absorbed into the body.
Right, and you just reminded me of a friend of mine. And I mean, it's that catch-22. It actually saved his life, apparently, or at least his skin. But a friend of mine, her son, was sleeping in the room, and somehow, I guess they had one of those, what do they call it, torchère lanterns. The lamps that are on a big pole, and it tipped over, and everything caught on fire except for his pajamas because they had that flame retardant in it. So I mean, this was a situation, but that it actually did help someone, but at the same time he's wearing all of these chemicals.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's interesting you bring that point up, because I just had a child 8 months ago, and one of the things that parents often do is they keep their kids' clothes. And my mother brought over like a pile of clothes from when I was a baby, and one of my sleep outfits had a label on it saying this product contains flame retardants. We also have like a sleep sack for our son Finley, and there's a label on it that says this product does not contain flame retardants. So they have to label it when they do. They have to label it when they don't. But seeing that on the clothes that I wore when I was a baby sort of horrified me.
Yeah.
Right. That I was wearing that and exposed to that. So it's everywhere. It's right against our skin. It's, in our upholstery, it's in couches, it's in carpets, it's in cars, when you smell the new car smell.
Oh yeah.
And this goes right into the body, and a lot of them get stored.
Oh jeez. Yeah, it feels a little dismal to listen to, just how much we're surrounded by these.
Yeah, we just actually, when we were looking for a car seat, we couldn't find any car seats without flame retardants in them. We found one car seat without flame retardants that had just come out on the market.
Wow.
And now there's laws starting to come into place that a lot of products don't have to contain flame retardants, because they've actually discovered they don't work.
Well,
as
I was
well
going to
as
say, and we have so fewer. I mean, if the genesis of this was that people were falling asleep with a cigarette in their hand or their mouth, whatever, not as many people are smoking in the U.S. As
absolutely.
there were once were. So, is it really? And they got to smoke outside. So is it really? And trees are going to catch fire. Like you can't do it to everything. You can't flame retard everything. So yeah, it doesn't seem like it's even necessary from what was the original rationale behind it. Now, you said that the body stores this for whatever reason. Do we know some of the reasons why the body stores it? Is it to protect us? Is it to because it doesn't know what to do with it? Because it's so foreign to our body? Is it what's going on there?
Right. So I think that's probably one of the mechanisms that it does. Certain chemicals are easily detoxified. They're easily cleared by the body. If you
Right.
take an aspirin, it kind of does its thing, kills the pain, and then we're able to clear it pretty easily. But there's other chemicals that, for whatever reason, our body holds on to much tighter. For various chemical, because of their chemical properties, like heavy metals, for example, will actually take the place of a lot of our minerals in enzymatic pathways. And it's hard to get them out. And even some tissues, it's harder to get it out than others. Like it's really hard to get heavy metals out of the brain versus other parts of the body, like the liver. And it's the same with these obesogens. They're called persistent organic pollutants because they persist in the environment for a long period of time.
Right.
And one of our body's ways to protect the vital organs from these chemicals is to store them if they can't detoxify them properly. So they store them in fat cells, which is this wonderful extraneous tissue that we can increase as much as we want and has like unlimited room to store all these things. So, one of the things that we are very careful of here in the clinic when we do weight loss with people is understanding that they could actually be releasing some of these chemicals as they're burning off some of those, those pounds.
Exactly.
Right. And that's something we have to take into account.
Right. So when you're taking them into account, I guess what we're trying to help escort them out of the body along with the fat that's being burned, correct? As opposed to just taking up residence somewhere else.
Exactly.
And I think this is something that a lot of people don't get. They're like, oh, I'm taking cilantro for heavy metal detoxification. But I'm like, well, how are you actually getting it out? Like once it's,
right.
It might dislodge it from a particular organ. But is it necessarily removing it in the urine and feces?
Exactly. That's so important and something that's often missed when it comes to detoxification. It's like saying, oh, I want to clean my house, do a little spring cleaning, and you're dusting and you're vacuuming, and then you go to take the garbage out and all the doors to your home are locked.
Yes.
It's like, how are you going to get that stuff out? Right? So what we talk about here is the 5 channels of elimination and how we actually get things from the inside of the body to the outside of the body. I mean, like, what are those pathways? So there's 5, the lungs, the bowel, which is obvious to most people, the kidneys, peeing things out, which is also obvious to most people, the skin, which is, always breathing. And the 5th one, which most people either ignore, forget, or don't even know about, is the mind. Because thoughts that get stuck in our head can actually be toxic to us.
Well, I think it's a metaphor, right? It's all everything is metaphorical, right? Because no, seriously, like our brain, it's like you think about when people ruminate on things, right? And they've got these toxic thoughts and, they wake up at 4:00 in the morning. And I'm saying this because this used to happen to me a lot. Wake up at 4:00 in the morning and remember something that happened in 3rd grade. And I still can't forgive that person for, right? So yeah. And, anal retentiveness, we all know what that's about, right?
Yeah. And you know what? It's not just a metaphor. This stuff has been shown in the literature. Now, one of the earlier researchers on this topic was Candace Pert, who wrote the book, The Molecules of Emotion.
Okay. Oh.
A wonderful book. But she describes how with each thought, with each perception that comes into our nervous system, we manufacture a cocktail of emotional chemicals that then go around into circulation in our body and hit the receptors of pretty much every cell.
Wow.
So when we are thinking, negative thoughts based out of fear, a lot of these chemicals are, geared towards degradation and catabolism and not healing, right? More of the sympathetic part of the nervous system.
Right.
And when we have, feelings of love and joyfulness and gratitude, it releases all these wonderful healing chemicals that can restore the function of our cells and, improve our health.
Right. Wow. That's really, really important. Thank you for elaborating on that, because it is something that we hear about, but I think a lot of people don't take it seriously enough. And, particularly here in the States, we can see it politically, just our whole political landscape. And this is one of the rare places where I'm not even going to choose sides right now, but like we're all having this knee-jerk reaction to everything that's going on. And I get it. I mean, I've been there, and I find myself going there sometimes, and I have to pull myself out because it's just, it's not worth me suffering over all the ridiculous stuff that's going on right now. So now, we talked about the different pathways that we can get rid of these. And you also touched on something that I often talk about here on the podcast, which is, for example, the heavy metals that would replace the essential molecules that we need, if we're getting a fluoride versus a chloride, into the body. How do we help get some of these obesogens out? Like, how do we, replace them so that they are not welcome anymore? Is there anything that we can do?
Oh, there's so much we can do. So much. So a lot of that goes into optimizing how those 5 channels of elimination work. So one thing, again, that people really need to understand is that the detoxification process is happening all the time in every cell of our body. So essentially what we're trying to help the body do is do a little catch up. I often give the analogy of a dishwasher in a restaurant. They're there standing doing the dishes, and they're doing them at a certain speed, right? They're coming in, they're washing them, they're coming out at the other end, and the restaurant can continue operating. But if the busyness of that restaurant increases, more dishes are coming in, and those dishes can pile up.
Right.
And when those dishes pile up, there's big problems. Eventually, there's no dishes left, and the restaurant has to shut down. So there's 2 ways we can deal with that. One, we can stop or decrease the amount of dishes coming in, stop the amount of customers, or 2, we can get more dishwashers. So essentially, when we're optimizing those 5 channels of elimination, we're doing both of those. We're trying to decrease what's coming in. We first have to think about what's in our environment and decrease that total body burden or total toxic load. So we, talk about where those would be in their environment and changing things up. And then we help to optimize those 5 channels of elimination, bringing more of those dishwashers in. And you used one great example, like cilantro. So from a nutritional perspective, there's a lot we can do there. We want a lot of good herbs and spices and colors to help fuel that detoxification process in the liver. But there's also a lot of other great lifestyle things we can do as well. Obviously drinking lots of water is super important. We can do sauna therapy, which really helps to, sweat out a lot of these things, which is a very efficient channel of elimination for some of the heavy metals. So once you start combining a lot of these different tools, you improve the efficiency of the body, and you start to purge a lot of these toxins.
Right. Now, what about, you talk about water, and I am somewhere in the middle on water, because I believe that water is a mineral delivery system. And in my lexicon, that's how it performs its work. Whereas a lot of people look at it as it doesn't have calories and we're just going to flush everything out. But, is there something to that, that you have to make sure the water is of a certain quality? Even like, for example, how bone broth has caught on, as a rich in mineral delivery system for water. Do you find that it will impact how efficiently the body can remove some of those other things?
I don't know if I've seen that specifically in the research, like where they've, done studies and said this water worked a lot better than that
Right.
water.
Well, I mean, even clinically
But
for yourself.
oh yeah, but for sure, I definitely talk about sort of the hierarchy of what the best water is for my
Okay.
clients, and probably one of the best ones is spring water. You
Right.
know, that is loaded with minerals, right?
Yes.
It gets filtered through the ground on the way down and gets remineralized through the ground on the way up.
Right. Just make sure don't buy it in plastic because now we're back to square one.
Exactly. Yeah, before we had a kid, we used to go up north with like 10 glass carboys. We'd load the car up,
Nice.
and we just fill up on spring water, and then I'd carry those all inside. It was like our neighbors must have thought we were crazy, but that's what we did.
Right.
So that's probably some of the best water, loaded with minerals. But the reality is, I'm working with a lot of people who live in the city who can't do that. So the next best thing is some sort of clean water, right? And reverse osmosis takes everything out. So if people can install that, that's important. If you can't afford a reverse osmosis or you can't install one, there's great filters like the Berkey system where you just pour it in the top, comes out beautifully in the bottom. And if you don't have access to that, just any type of filter, right? So that's sort of the hierarchy. And we need clean water coming into the body, or else chemicals are going straight into the bloodstream within like 20 minutes.
Right. So what about cookware? Because obviously, we're going through all of this trouble to, minimize these different obesogens in the environment and, our water, et cetera. What about when it comes to cookware? Are there particular forms of cookware that we should be looking out for that might be damaging our metabolisms, our endocrine system?
Absolutely, yeah. Teflon, which is that non-stick, black coating that's on a lot of pans, is an obesogen.
Yeah.
And, Teflon doesn't really do much until you heat it up.
Yeah. Isn't that ironic?
Then it becomes a problem. Like Teflon, they put in a lot of toilets. So things don't stick when you flush them down, right?
I didn't have to think about that this morning, but okay, let's go for it.
But when you put it in the cookware, you're heating it up, and when you heat it up, it makes it very unstable. And Teflon's actually quite difficult to kind of get out of your body once it's in. There's other chemicals are a lot easier to get in. So you get all this beautiful organic food, and then you're cooking it on Teflon, and you're getting this chemical. I think birds have been killed by using Teflon in little homes, where there's no air ventilation.
Oh wow.
So yeah, Teflon's not a good one. Aluminum I would stay away from because of the heavy metal.
Right.
Really cheap pans, sometimes you don't even know what's in them, so I would stay away from those. Copper could be problematic for some people. They're often used in really, really nice, high-end chef's cookware.
Yes.
But, that can create an imbalance in some people. Yeah, so those would be some of the ones to stay away from.
Do you have a favorite one that you would say, if you're gonna, again, maybe it's a hierarchy, whether it's cast iron, stainless, ceramic.
Those are all great. Yeah. Yeah. We have a few different ones in our home. We use mostly stainless steel. We've got some ceramic, like from the company Le Creuset, which makes fabulous cookware. And those are the main ones we use. Glass is also good, for like, liquid type things.
Right. Yeah. I'm having trouble finding, maybe it's because I live on an island, but I've been having trouble finding glass cookware recently. I was looking for something. But in any case, so let's move on to actual foods that might be impacting our endocrine system. And I want to start with the oils, fats and oils. What's going on there?
Sure. Well, to set the stage here, every single cell in our body, every one of our 10 trillion cells has a cell membrane that's made up of phospholipids. And that second part of that word there, phospholipid, is lipid, fat.
Right.
So those are the walls of every single cell in our body, and it's what communicates with other cells and what's in the bloodstream, and how there's communication within the body. So, if you have a wall around the city and it's broken and it's made up of bad material, and the doors are kind of hanging off, and the guards around them aren't working so well, and the communication is out on some parts of the wall, that city on the inside isn't going to operate too well and communicate too well with the outside world. And it's the same with our cells. So we need good fats to build those walls so communication can happen properly.
Mm-hmm.
And we get those fats from our food.
Right. So what happens when we consume some fats that are inappropriate? Like what would be, I mean, you're from the land of canola oil, which is,
yes, we are.
Which, I remember the last time I was in Canada, I was like, really, I can't get anything without canola oil, huh? It's really that insidious. What are some of the ones that will cause, they're not doing a good patch job on the cell wall.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you just before I get there is that canola oil fields,
mm-hmm.
like farm fields, are one of the most beautiful things you see here.
It's true.
In Ontario. They're just unbelievable. But they pack a mean hidden punch of inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, what was the question again? I got distracted thinking about these beautiful fields. I was like, you were like taking me back to last summer.
I was asking which oils are maybe not doing such a great job of patching the hole or helping the functioning of the cell wall.
Right. So it's not always necessarily the specific oil, but it's sometimes how it's processed too.
Yeah.
So,
true.
Canola oil isn't the devil.
Mm-hmm.
It's when it gets heated and cooked and processed where it really becomes a bad oil. And, a lot of these oils that you see in the grocery store that are in these clear plastic containers have gone through a very long process to get them so shelf stable that they can just sit there forever and not go rancid, because oils are very, very sensitive. Like canola oil has a lot of omega-6 in it, which is an essential oil, meaning our body can't make it. So that's one of the issues. It goes through, at least, 7 or 8 steps to get there, where they're taking out the oil from the plant, degumming it, refining it, bleaching it, deodorizing it, and you're not left with a lot of nutrition at the end. Right. And then another issue for a lot of people is that they consume the wrong ratio of oils because they're eating a lot of processed food. So again, a lot of processed foods, because these oils are cheap, they're using like safflower oil, sunflower oil, canola oils, and those are very high in omega-6s. So it creates an imbalance in the body of omega-6 to omega-3.
Right.
And that really sets the body up for an inflammatory process to occur.
Right. So remind us the ideal ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. And we hear more about the omega-3s than the omega-6s. And I think it's just because we get so much omega-6 inadvertently. But you have to seek out, it seems, the omega-3s a little bit more. True?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So the optimal ratio is about a 3-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3.
And we're getting what, 50-to-1, 20-to-1?
It could get that high. Yeah. About 20-to-1 to 50-to-1 is like the standard American diet.
Right. So then, how are we? What's a simple way? Because, like I said, we have to seek out the omega-3s. We know it's in fish oil. We know it's in flax and hemp. What's a simple way people can make sure they get enough of the omega-3s?
Well, the Paleolithic diet has taken a huge surge.
Mm-hmm.
And a big focus of the Paleolithic diet, and just, for your listeners to set the stage, I'm not like an advocate of one specific diet.
Yeah. Like
when I work with people, we just try to figure out the diet that's best for them, right? So I'm not like a Paleolithic dude, right? But I'm using it as an example because it's taken a huge surge, and a big focus of it is sort of eating the way we ate thousands of years ago. So, if we're eating animals, you're not just you are what you eat, but you are what you eat eats.
Right,
And
right,
a lot of those animals that might be part of the Paleolithic diet are eating, wild foods
Yes.
themselves, and, I guess beef is a big one, right? They're if they're eating grass, they're getting a lot of omega-3s and good fats. But if they're eating the typical feed in a lot farm, they're getting a lot of the omega-6s.
Yeah.
So you could be eating the same food, but depending on what they have eaten, you could be getting two completely different versions.
Right.
And so when we're going back to, organic, natural meats, natural foods, lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of nuts and seeds, the stuff that was just here, before we thought we were smarter than nature and created all these frankenfoods, you're going to be on the right track.
Yeah.
And you probably don't have to think about it too much.
Right. So let's say somebody isn't paleo, and and let's take this to the other extreme. They are vegan. And, where are they going to easily get their omega-3s?
Well, a lot of the same principles apply to a vegan. They're looking for just whole foods.
Right.
And so a lot of the essential fats are going to come from nuts and seeds, but you still get some in vegetables.
Uh-huh.
If you think about what a cow eats, they just eat green leafy vegetables all day long.
True. But
And
they
that's
also
where
have four stomachs to convert. And I've got goats too, so I see what they're eating.
Yes,
And
yes.
one of the things I know about goats is they produce more vitamin C than like any other species. Apparently, they're like vitamin C factories, so they're pretty hardy animals. It's weird because on the one side they're hardy, on the other side they can get sick really easily and die within 24 hours. It's the weirdest thing with them. But I think part of my success thus far with them has been rotating them on different grasses around my property so that they're not constantly eating, basically where they've pooped, because they don't pay attention to where they poop. So.
What a great tip. I'll keep that in mind if I ever have goats.
No, but seriously, they can get parasites quite easily. And, the inside of their eyelid will turn white, which means that basically they're anemic. And within 24 hours, if you don't catch them right away, you can totally lose your goat the next day. Yeah.
I love that. We can learn so much when we live closer to nature and live with other organisms and watch how they live and kind of apply that to ourselves as well.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that I've gotten into since moving to Hawaii, and I bore my audience to death with this, is this system of farming called Korean natural farming, which is based on the old Japanese techniques that, a lot of people have forgotten, actually Japanese and Korean. But it was kind of systematized by a guy named Master Cho. And he is, he's really focused on the indigenous microorganisms in the soil. So, I like to think of it as sort of like probiotics that feed the plants. Then, in turn, they can feed us similarly. So where we're not talking about soil tests and get this much nutrients, we're looking at how can we build a soil foundation that the plants will just love and will help them thrive. And everything else falls into place once you have that. So, sorry, I'm just elaborating on what you're saying about learning from nature. The more I get into having this farm, having this the animals, the land that I'm reworking. We also have chickens, we have cats. So I see how each species has different needs and how they react to different things. And it really is eye-opening for our human organism.
I love that. And, I'm here in Toronto, in a city, and people get so removed from their optimal environment.
Oh, for
sure. Like you go to a zoo, and in that zoo, there's 72 different pavilions, right? There's the ones for the snakes that live in like a nice dry area with, hot lamp and whatever, and then there's like the polar bears and like the icy area with the water and everything, and each organism has an optimal environment. So humans have sort of forgotten that question, what's the optimal environment for us?
Yeah.
We grew up outside, we grew up in nature.
Yeah.
Obviously there's some benefits for being in these controlled environments indoors, but we always have to try to find that optimal balance, and getting into nature, I think, which is a whole other discussion for a whole other day, is so important.
Right, right. And going a little bit beyond just like the regular hike too, I mean, unless you are really into the wildlife that you're seeing on that hike. I think sometimes, I mean, getting out in nature is good anyway, don't get me wrong. But when we're really trying to connect and understand ourselves, it really helps to observe how the other animals live. So, whenever you can, like even my husband is an avid bird watcher, for example, so he can tell me all kinds of things about bird habitats that I just never would have picked up. But then again, we got chickens, and that knowledge increased so much just by seeing their behaviors, what they are drawn to, how they eat, the conditions that they need for laying eggs, for example, and things like that. Really, really enlightening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was at a conference last year, and one of the questions we had from the audience was someone was quite skeptical that organic was even organic. They're like, how do we even know if organic's organic? Like, where do we actually get good food? So we were on a panel. I was on a panel with 4 other people, and one of the things we brought up was this, bringing the nature in, growing your own stuff,
Right.
which is so easy, right? And even having like a little herb pot in your kitchen. If you're in like the smallest apartment in New York, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in a second floor of a house in my previous residence, and I had a whole garden just on my back deck with,
Right.
It was astounding how much food I can make. And
Wow.
from those experiences, they're like force multipliers, right? You don't just make the food, but you learn just so much about food, about nature, about soil, about health, about, the taste and the flavor of real food, that it opens up your mind to a whole other world.
Right, for sure. Well, and you are now reminding me about something that I learned with this farming technique, is that the mouth of the plant is actually in the roots. And for example, I am about to plant some olive trees and banana and things like that, and the mouth needs air. You don't, our instinct is to dig a hole, put the tree down in the hole, and then pack that soil on as tight as we can.
Yeah.
And really what ends up happening is you end up stunting the growth of the plant. But if you build a mound, and it can be like, dried up sticks and leaves and, some dirt in there for sure, and then you plant your tree in there, and so that the roots can breathe and they can reach oxygen, you're going to get a tall, strong tree that's going to start digging down into the soil and breaking up. Like, I have a lot of rock where I live, so it's going to start breaking up the rock and converting that into soil. I mean, it's really, really fascinating when we start to realize that, the leaves aren't the mouth, but the roots are.
I love that. I'm going to have to give you a call when I'm ready to set up my garden.
All right. Well, yeah. And there's no shortage of like regenerative farming podcast episodes that we have here.
Very cool.
Like every system teaches me something else. If nothing else, just the amount of power that we have within ourselves to make this happen. And again, a lot of this permaculture type of farming practices, they're getting away from the soil test and they're going back to observing and understanding the life cycle of a plant. If a tree is starting to flower, it's very similar to pregnancy. So where, for example, I know when I was pregnant, getting rid of morning sickness was often, well, for me, it was a lot of protein in the morning, but also sour. That, when they talk about women craving pickles and ice cream, and it's no joke, it's the sourness of pickles really does a lot for morning sickness. And it turns out that sourness, vinegar, will do a lot for your trees that are flowering to create healthy fruit. So yeah, it's just so many parallels that have gotten me to reevaluate my understanding of nutrition just through looking at it through the plant lens.
Very cool.
What are some of the You talked about the animals that can contribute to hormonal imbalance. Are there vegetables and legumes that we should be on the lookout for? Because there's a tendency to kind of gang up on the animal foods, like animals, they cause so many problems. But we know that there's some plants that are estrogenic, for example.
For sure. And I think it really, shows us when things get overdone. I think that's the big problem.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Like soy, for example, right? In Japan, they're mostly using it as a condiment.
Yeah.
But here, vegans or vegetarians are like, oh, soy's a good protein source. I've got to include it with everything.
Right.
And I'm going to get soy meat and soy milk and soy cheese and soy everything. And you end up overdoing what's in that food. We are always meant to kind of be omnivorous and look at many different foods and kind of forage for different things when they're in season. I think an issue that we've got into with some of these foods like soy is that word estrogenic or phytoestrogens. In fact, the researcher that discovered phytoestrogens regrets he ever called them phytoestrogens because they're not necessarily estrogens, but they're more modulators of estrogen.
Yes.
So, for example, soy have weak estrogens in them. Now, if an individual has high estrogen in their body, endogenous estrogen, and they want to, that estrogen takes up a receptor on our cells, like a parking spot. And if we want to occupy some of those parking spots with a weaker estrogen, the soy estrogen actually turns out to be a good option. But if we overdo it, then even though it's a weaker estrogen, we're like just saturating the body with too much estrogen again. So it becomes that type of problem. So sometimes it's a balance. So, when I work with clients and we're using specific therapeutic foods, we also talk about the dosage. So I don't say to them, hey, you've got estrogen dominance, go and eat everything soy. We say, keep it to 2 to 3 servings a week. These are the foods that have those phytoestrogens in them. Eat this particular amount, don't overdo it, and it should have the desirable effect.
I like that. Partially because I recently interviewed a Dr. Rashna Patel, who is a medical marijuana expert. And so we kind of, talked about this whole concept of dosing, with the medical marijuana, because, you're not trying to get high, but that's what, people think, like, no matter what, you're going to get, some kind of hit from that. And yeah, so it's definitely mirroring that. And we don't, you're so right, because we don't think of these foods as like, let's take 8 ounces, 2 ounces, whatever it is for a particular food, per day or, over the course of a week or whatever it is, to make sure that we're getting the right amount, because we're very much an all or nothing kind of society, aren't we? When in North America, where it's like, oh, more is better.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll get rid of it. I'll get rid of it faster if I take twice as much.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you suggest people make these changes without getting totally neurotic?
I think there's different type of people. There's like the cold turkey people.
Mm-hmm.
I get the cold turkey clients who are like, tell me exactly what I need to do and I will do it 100%. I think that's a small percentage of our population. I think most people like to, go slow and steady and start with a few changes, easy things as time goes on, incorporating it into their life, making it a habit, then moving on to the next. And the beauty about your podcast and all this great information that's now out there is that people can saturate their brains with this information. And as they're listening to it and learning more, they can incorporate more and more and more. And it often happens so slow, people don't even notice.
Right.
So, one thing that I ask when I do talks places is I ask of the audience, does everyone know at least one thing they can do today to improve their health? And everyone puts up their hand. Right? Like, right. I think we all know at least one thing to do. So people listening right now should think about that. Write it down. When you write it down, you make it real and do that one thing for like at least 30 days.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about health and creating new healthy habits is that you get compounding interest, health interest from them. Like when you put $100 into the bank account and you're making, say 5% interest on that, it compounds over time. You keep on making interest on the total amount. And that's what happens with health. So as you add habits over habits over habits over habits, you get this compounding health effect into your health account, and it adds up over the years in a positive way. And
Right.
It's amazing. So I think baby steps for a lot of people is a great way to do it.
Yeah, because even just you have a really great article on the obesogens on your website, and you've got, I think it was 7 or 8 different ways that people can kind of detoxify, right? So it was the drinking the waters, brushing your skin, and a couple. I forget what the other things were. Those are 2 that jumped out at me, and obviously avoiding them as much as possible. But I was like, wow. That can be a little over some people's head, right? Because it's like, oh my gosh, now I've got to like I'm already busy. Now I got to set aside time to brush my damn skin. I've got to go up to the mountain and fetch water in a glass carboy.
Right. Well, that's like the advanced level, like, there's like active and passive things you can do. Like when we're talking about the detoxification, the passive things are things you have to do like once or twice, right, and you never ever have to think about it again, which is amazing, right? Like if you're switching out all your beauty products and cosmetics and cleaning products in your house and personal care personal care products and the products in your kitchen, and you're throwing out all your Teflon pans and getting new pans, like that type of stuff, you never have to think about it again, really. Right? So it takes no more mental energy. That's the passive stuff. But then there's the active stuff, which takes a little bit more practice, like in terms of doing it daily or weekly or monthly. Like taking a sauna, doing a hot yoga, drinking lots of water, doing a detoxification protocol, making a green juice, taking some chlorella tablets, right? Like those things are more active, but those passive ones are a huge bang for your buck. They just help you basically get to zero, right? Yeah. They help get to that baseline.
Right. Just it's like your support characters. It's like it's okay. It's already in place. I don't have to do anything else after that, or at least within reason. So, in any case, tell us a little bit about your functional nutrition certification program.
Right. So, I've taught at a couple health colleges here in Toronto, and then I started teaching privately, and I really just began teaching privately and putting these courses together because my students were asking over and over, tell me more about digestion, tell me more about hormones, how do you put your protocols together? So as the courses added up, I finally got to a point where I had a whole, amazing program for practitioners who really want to dive deep, and health enthusiasts alike who want to dive deep into the information. And I take a lot of the sort of the practical knowledge that I've gained over my years of doing this, and a lot of the book knowledge, like, the latest research and studies and textbooks and all the stuff that I've gotten my hands on over the years as well in that respect. And I combine them both to really get the best of both worlds, and that's what I put into my courses. So I have a full functional nutrition certification program. It's about a year long, depending on where you start. And we have a specific course in digestion, one on hormones, detox, mental health. I have a course on how I put protocols together. We talk about functional lab testing and normal lab testing, and people walk away with some real powerful tools in their toolkit there.
Nice. That's really, really important because I think it's not necessarily, especially the putting together protocols is not necessarily one of the keys that's handed over to us in many of the varying, it's unfortunately nutrition is unregulated, so it's, there's just not a lot of guidance for a lot of people how to really get down and dirty with putting together good protocols.
Absolutely,
that are not overwhelming for the patient.
And that's what's so important in this field. there's podcasts like yours, there's summits, there's, these video, movies that are put out on the internet. I mean, there's so much information today. People get overwhelmed, and they also, a lot of it, I think, gives people a false sense of what it actually takes and what's involved in getting healthy.
Yeah.
And it really happens in the clinic, in this clinical setting, working with real people. Mm-hmm. Real people that when you give them a protocol that you read in a textbook or even a study, don't necessarily respond the way it's showed on paper.
Exactly.
And then what do you got to do? Right.
And that's sorry to interrupt, but that's actually been a little bit of my beef, so to speak, with studies, because we've, mm-hmm. Had a few people who all they do is cite studies all day. And I'm saying, well, mm-hmm. what does it show clinically? Like, are you actually seeing those studies play out? Because we can talk about studies, all day long. But if for one thing, we know, I'm pretty sure that a lot of studies are designed with an end in mind, and they will prove that come hell or high water that it's going to play out the way they want it, and we know that certain data has been manipulated in certain studies. So how can we put that much faith in all of them when we know that there's going to be limitations in study design?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've even written about this in the past. There's a couple of blogs on it on my website, but the gluten debate is such a good example of exactly that. Right. That you've got a group of clinicians that are working with people in the flesh and blood every single day, writing books and writing articles about gluten and how when people eliminate it, they have wonderful results.
Yeah.
And then you have people who are saying, but the research isn't as solid as what you're saying in your books. And then they write books like The Gluten Lie or write articles, with those titles. And unfortunately, or fortunately, like both sides are right. The research isn't ironclad, but the clinicians are also working with real humans in the flesh.
Yeah.
And, one of the past editors of The Lancet even said himself that, we shouldn't wait until science is 100% before we make changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I could give so many examples. Like, I'll just give a couple, like the folic acid mm-hmm. situation where, that prevents spina bifida. Right. Doctors knew that for 20 years before it was standard in clinical practice to tell people to take 1 milligram of folic acid.
Right.
The gentleman who discovered hand washing prevented, women giving birth from dying was ridiculed and shunned from his community.
That's ridiculous. It's like hand washing. Are you serious?
Yes. Yeah. So the question is today, what are we not accepting 100% or not accepting as good clinical evidence that we're saying, hey, we need to wait for the research to appear? And, gluten's a great example.
Probiotics,
right? Vaccines, there's a lot of stuff coming out on that as well, but that would be a discussion for another day.
Oh, boy, would it.
So we at the end of the day, people need to take the information that's out there and actually decide for themselves what sounds most right for them.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And to kind of drive this home, here in Hawaii, I mean, it's all over, but we grow turmeric. And I recently had a case of hives, which I'm pretty sure was connected to turmeric. Now, it's something that I've been eating all my life, but I was going through something and I was talking to, I forget who, I think it was my acupuncturist, and she said, oh, maybe up your turmeric a little bit. And I tried it, and sure as heck, I broke out into hives that night. And I was like, but again, if you look at just what you're reading in these studies and on the internet, you're thinking, oh, the turmeric can do no harm. It's always 100% anti-inflammatory, but for whatever reason, I don't know what the combination of factors were that day, but I broke out into hives, and I'm pretty sure that was the only thing that I could discern as being different that day. We've got to sometimes heed the warnings of our own individual experience and, as clinicians, what we are seeing. It's not always about the patient lying or trying to say that they did something that they didn't. Often there are going to be things that are going to deviate from the textbook.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just on your point, one person's food is another person's poison. It can be anything.
Okay, so Josh Gitalis, that's JoshGitalis.com. And you can also find him on Facebook at Josh Gitalis, Clinical Nutritionist, and on Instagram, Josh Gitalis. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Adrian. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. The Nutrition Heretic Podcast is a production of Savor the Journey, LLC. Our audio editor is Nicola Popovich. Our podcast manager is Crystal McLean, and our operations manager is Michelle Med. I'm your host, Adrian Hugh, the Nutrition Heretic. You can find us at the new and improved nutritionheretic.com, where you can download the Nutrition Heretic's free shit list of 7 health foods to avoid like the plague. You can also listen to previous episodes at nutritionheretic.com/podcast. Be sure to like us on social media for updates. Our Facebook page is facebook.com/nutritionheretic and on Twitter @NutriHeretic. Contact us with show ideas, questions, or if you want to be a guest. And don't forget to rate our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher.